Now, elsewhere in the world this weekend, Israeli officials are furious, to say the least, about America's decision to not back Israel in a crucial vote at the United Nations Security Council. Last night, it passed a resolution formally condemning Israel for building settlements close to Palestinian territories and disputed parts of Jerusalem. Now, the U.S. could have vetoed it, which would have killed the resolution, but the Obama administration instead chose to abstain, allowing it to pass. Israel's top diplomat at the UN angrily took to Twitter. These were his words: "I have no doubt that the new U.S. administration will usher in a new era." CNN's Oren Lieberman is in Jerusalem for us today. And Oren, this resolution obviously has created a lot of waves diplomatically, but when it comes to the reality on the ground, how much will this change it, if at all?
In terms of the effect on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's very possible this resolution will have absolutely no effect. It's a non-binding resolution. It's effectively a guideline or a recommendation, and it requires follow-up action at the UN for it to really have any teeth. That's where President-elect Donald Trump has promised to protect Israel at the UN, so it could be at least 4 years, possibly more, possibly much more, before this has any real effect on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In fact, that's what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is promising. He spoke on the first night of Hanukkah just a short time ago. What effect has this had now? He has taken diplomatic action against the UN. He says he'll reevaluate the status of UN representatives here, and he's canceling Israeli funding to 5 different UN organizations, totaling nearly $8 million. Meanwhile, he fired off one of the harshest criticisms we've ever seen from an Israeli administration pointed at an American government, specifically at President Barack Obama, as have many of his other ministers, accusing President Obama of being anti-Israel and allowing this to pass. Many of Israel's ministers, many of the right-wing ministers here have said the proper response to this resolution should be more building in the settlements, more building in the territories, and annexation. Some of his ministers have called for annexation for parts or all of the West Bank. That would fly immediately in the face of this Security Council resolution.
It sure would, and it is an indication that perhaps it could backfire, which is what a lot of critics of the resolution are saying. Thank you, Oren Lieberman, for that report. And speaking of critics, I'm joined now on the phone by Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina. Senator, first of all, thank you for joining me on this Christmas Eve. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. I want to start with what Oren was just talking about news today, that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, said that they would reevaluate relations with the United Nations, effectively saying that they would withhold money for 5 of its organizations. I'm guessing that you think that that is a good idea?
Yeah, I talked to Bibi yesterday. This is a real affront to the state of Israel. It's been decades-old policy for the United States, by the United States, to make sure the parties negotiate on the ground in the Mideast, not in the UN Security Council. And he told me that when it comes to the UN, the gloves are off, and I told him that's my view too. So I will respond in kind. 22% of the United Nations budget comes from the American taxpayer, and I'm going to lead the charge to withhold funding until they repeal this resolution.
You know, you've been talking about that, but I guess when I hear you say that, my question is, what makes you think that will turn around the entire Security Council on this settlement issue? I realize that 22% is a lot of money, but it's certainly not the whole ball game from them.
Oh, no. I mean, it's up to the body to decide what kind of body it would like to be. Here's my view of the peace process. Israel gave Gaza completely to the Palestinians years ago. They withdrew. They've gotten 10,000 rockets fired from the Gaza Strip controlled by Hamas. Who in the hell is Israel supposed to do peace with? The Palestinian Authority pay young Palestinians money to kill Israelis and Americans. Taylor Force was a young man whose parents live in South Carolina, West Point graduate, went to Israel on a visit as part of a graduate exchange program and was killed by a Palestinian, and the body was sent back to Ramallah, and he was given a state funeral, and his family was paid a big lump sum of cash by the Palestinian Authority because he was a hero in their eyes. Not only am I going to lead the charge to suspend funding to the United Nations until they correct this problem, we're going to suspend funding to the Palestinians Authority until they stop paying young Palestinians to murder innocent people.
You think you're going to get enough support for that to withhold that kind of funding for the Palestinians?
I think it'd be a very interesting vote. And what's so sad about this is I'm an internationalist. I went to the new Secretary General designate about 4 weeks ago talking about a Marshall Plan for the developing world. I have been very in the forefront of trying to create aid programs to combat terrorism. You're not going to war on terror by killing terrorists. Got to build up the lives of others, and the UN does a lot of good work in the refugee area. But I said, please don't single out Israel. The reason we don't have peace is not because of settlements. Again, Israel gave all of the Gaza Strip back to the Palestinians, and in return, they have a terrorist organization launching rockets into Israel. So it's not settlements, it's the idea that the Palestinians won't accept the recognition of the Jewish state as being a viable entity. So I think most members of Congress believe that the Obama administration's decision to break with 40 years of policy is unacceptable. The UN needs to be put on notice that the Congress is a player when it comes to American foreign policy, and I don't believe most Americans want to fund an organization who can't see the difference between a democracy, Israel, and a terrorist organization, which is the Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority is headed in that direction.
And let me just put a button on this UN issue. There has been no love lost historically between your party and the UN at various points. But given the fact that President Trump is coming in, who has the same view on this as you, what do you think this means for the future of the United Nations?
I think the United Nations needs to understand that Israel's not always the bad guy. What resolution has been passed by the United Nations condemning the slaughter of 500,000 people in Syria? Mm-hmm. Does the UN say anything when Israel's attacked viciously by Hezbollah and Hamas, where a 13-year-old girl was killed in her bed by Palestinian terrorists? I think most American political leaders in the Congress believe that the UN has been one-sided, and that the Prime Minister of Israel told me that there are three threats to the Jewish state: Iran with a nuclear weapon, the Ayatollah with a nuke, the marginalization of the Jewish state by international bodies like the United Nations, and traditional radical Islamic terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIL. So what I want the UN to know is that I understand you do good things. I would like the UN to be a better organization for helping people to advance the cause of liberty. The only democracy in the region is Israel, and it's odd to me that the UN singles out the one place where people can elect their leaders and the rule of law trumps religion to punish them and have a one-sided view of this situation.
Senator, when you spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu, did you discuss with him whether or not he thinks that this is kind of personal with President Obama, maybe a final poke in the eye from somebody whom he didn't get along with for 8 years?
People say that. No, we didn't talk about that.
Okay.
But name one party in Israel who likes this. The left in Israel is not embracing this resolution. The entire political infrastructure of Israel, left, right, and middle, all major parties oppose the Iran nuclear agreement. So President Obama is just not giving the finger to Bibi. He's putting the entire Jewish state, the state of Israel, at risk by having the international community call it an outlaw, taking a one-sided view of the dispute. I would like a two-state solution. I'd love the Palestinians to live in dignity along beside a secure Israel. That's not going to happen anytime soon. And this last effort by Obama and Kerry to be cute as they leave office has made it harder to restart the peace process. I don't see any situation where Israel can constructively engage in the peace process as long as this resolution is in being. And
Senator,
so to the UN, if you want to restart the peace process, repeal the resolution.
Senator, I want to play for our viewers and for you some of what the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, said, explaining why the U.S. abstained yesterday. Take a listen.
The Israeli Prime Minister recently described his government as, quote, more committed to settlements than any in Israel's history, end quote. And one of his leading coalition partners recently declared that, quote, the era of the two-state solution is over, end quote. At the same time, the Prime Minister has said that he is still committed to pursuing a two-state solution. But these statements are irreconcilable One cannot simultaneously champion expanding Israeli settlements and champion a viable two-state solution that would end the conflict.
So, Senator, what she's saying is effectively that the settlements antagonize Palestinians and therefore hinder peace. She's not the only one who thinks this. So what's your response to that?
My response is that the reason there is no peace between the Palestinians and Israel is not because of land. Israel gave up the entire Gaza Strip. They withdrew completely. Gaza now is in the hands of Hamas. 10,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel. So the settlement issue, the land problem, is not why we don't have peace. The problem is the Hamas wants to drive Israel into the ocean, and the Palestinians are educating their young people to hate the Jewish people and are paying young Palestinians to kill Jews. That's the problem. This is not a land problem. If I were an Israeli politician, every time a rocket was fired at my schools and at my kids indiscriminately trying to kill as many civilians as they could, I would grab some land too, because you've got to push back. So where is the UN when it comes to indiscriminate killing of Israelis by Palestinian terrorists? Hamas firing into Israel indiscriminately, trying to kill children. Where are they then? Not a word coming out of the body. So it's not a land problem, it's an attitude problem. How do you do peace with people who are committed to destroy you?
Well, Senator, that is a very tough question that has been vexing, obviously, for almost 100 years, and if not more. I appreciate you coming on with me now, especially on this Christmas Eve, and for your insight into this issue. Again, appreciate it. And Merry Christmas, Senator.
Merry Christmas. Thanks.
Thank you.